Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone, episode number 179 for the 24th of March, 2012. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Not much time to talk. We have such a packed episode today. Starting off with sex. Let me just say that again. Sex. I think you get the message. Yes, we really mean it. Sex, sex, sex. Maynard's going to be interviewing Dr Bella Ellwood-Clayton, who is a sexual anthropologist. Good heavens. Have a very strong cup of coffee and listen to Maynard's interview with Dr Ellwood-Clayton. One of Maynard's best interviews coming up at the top of the show. And then coming up after the break, it's a Penny for Your Thoughts with Penny Chan in LA. Penny interviews Jarrett Kaufman, who is also known as Timmy from the popular online show Mr. Deity, or Mr. Deity. He's also involved with the independent investigations group IIG in LA, which is a volunteer-based organisation founded by Jim Underdown. Jim Underdown, haven't seen him for a while. Hope to catch up with him in TAM. Yeah, TAM in Las Vegas. Anyway, tune in the middle of the show for Penny's interview with Jarrett Kaufman. And then to wrap up the show, one of my QED interviews. When I was in Manchester recently, I catch up with, in fact, I meet for the first time Kristin Carlsson from the Norwegian Skeptics. Spoken to her online, interviewed her before, and corresponded. This was the first chance we actually had to meet. And in fact, as I record this, she's in Melbourne on a little bit of an Australian trip. Hope to be catching up with her for lunch next week here in Sydney. What a treat. Anyway, that's at the end of the show, interview with Kristin Carlsson from Norway. Now, a couple of things coming up in the coming week. On the 29th of March in Albury, New South Wales, which is one of the major regional centres, I'll be visiting our roving Skeptic Zone correspondent, Dr Chrissy Wilson. Now, I'm attending the launch of Soap, or The Science of Anomalistic Phenomena. Sounds really good, really interesting. If you want to come along to see the launch of Soap, which is a free event, then visit www.skepticzone.tv and click on the link from the show notes for today's episode. Can't wait to go and visit Chrissy and help her launch Soap. Which means, sadly, I won't be back quite in time to go to the Australian Skeptics dinner here in Sydney, where the special guest is Professor John Dwyer. He's going to be speaking about Friends of Science in Medicine. Now, if you want to book your ticket for this dinner and talk by Professor John Dwyer, it's on the 31st of March at 6:30 p.m. at the Ryde Eastwood Leagues Club. Best thing to do is to go to www.skeptics.com.au, click the link, buy your ticket, go along and hear what Professor Dwyer has to say about the fight against the sheer lunacy of the extreme forms of quackery like homeopathy. Someone should put that into a song. Right, well, that's about all I have to say for right now. I'm going to run downstairs. I'm not going to go to the fridge and look for something to drink. I'm going to run downstairs and practice a few magic tricks because, oh yes, Uncle Richard's been roped in to be the magician at his nephew's Harry Potter-themed birthday party this afternoon. Better practice some magic, yes. Look, I'll do that. I'll disappear and do that while you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Why is everybody having better sex than me, you, and apparently everyone's having it more often as well. Now, someone who might be able to answer this question, as well as a few other things that I would like to know, is Dr Bella Ellwood-Clayton, author of Sex Drive, In Pursuit of Female Desire. And, Dr Bella Ellwood-Clayton, you're a sexual anthropologist.
Yes, that's right.
Now, normally, like I would describe myself as that, but that's just because I've been around. What do we get to do? Do you get to go to, like, the Andes or anything, or, overseas? What do you get to do as a sexual anthropologist?
Well, right, yes. Sexual anthropologists look at how sex and sexuality are shaped by culture. So we might study things such as sex tourism or first sex, or how contraception is used in Africa versus downtown Melbourne.
And where did you get your doctorate in, and what did you study?
Yes, I did my BA in anthropology in Concordia University in Montreal in Canada, and then came to Australia, which is where I was actually born and my father's from, to do my PhD at Melbourne Uni. And
what do you do on a daily basis? Are you currently undertaking a study? Do people turn up and book stuff on you with Medicare? What do you do?
Well, these days, after I sort of left university, I would say, I published a fair few papers after completing my PhD, and I thought, this is a bit frustrating. The research that we're coming up with isn't being heard by the mainstream. People aren't getting this. It's just sort of being circulated in academic journals. So I decided I'd like to write for popular culture and write about sexuality and cross-culturally and love and relationships. So I've done just that, and have been writing columns and articles in Australian newspapers and magazines, and appearing on TV and giving people advice as well.
And when I first saw your book, Sex Drive, and turned the back over, and it says, when it comes to women's priority, is sex on top, and their sex drive seems to be waning. And I thought, well, yeah, I'm not just talking about everybody's sex drive is under pressure with stress, work,
yes,
with various ages. So it doesn't surprise me at all that this is the case. So what is particularly in women's case here?
Well, generally, I believe women don't want sex because they don't feel sexy. And we see that sex declines in a number of studies for numerous reasons, for both men and women. It can decline over the duration of a relationship, as we age, due to life pressures, and certainly because of having children. For women particularly, there's a number of reasons that I think contribute to perhaps our lower levels of libido, and these include body image, parenting, role overload, depression, and arguably aging as well.
And how can you isolate any one of these? I mean, to me, they sound like what a statistician would call a synergism, like any one of them on their own. They're all added up. They add up to more than all of them would be on their own put together.
You're exactly right, and they add up to women feeling tired and not sexy, and like the spaces that they do have, the empty spaces in their life. Sex is not what they want to be filled with that. So I'm actually just calling to question, what role does sensuality have in our life? That's up to individuals within a couple to negotiate, I believe, and I think we can stop necessarily creating what role sex and sensuality is in our life based on what the media and society are telling us is the right amount, or even science is telling us, and try to come up with something that suits your partner and yourself.
And so do you think a lot of people think that everyone else is having better sex more often, more merely because, A, they might not talk about it, so everyone thinks that's got to be the case, or because the media, and particularly magazines like Cosmo and even Dolly to a certain extent, where do they play their role in it?
Well, certainly, we are growing up watching films where everything seems to be pointed to how to find love, how to attract love and desire, and wrangle in the one. But what happens after we've found the person we want to share our life with? If we can even achieve that, it's so great. But then how do we maintain love? How do we maintain passion? Our expectations of passionate long-term monogamy are so extraordinary. And that leaves many of us feeling like our relationships don't match. They don't live up to it. And that's not a good feeling for anybody to have.
Well, in your book, you write a bit about the work of Rosemary Basson. Now, and she talks about the sexual response modes of females there, which is kind of technical. And basically, quoting from your book here, it says, to women who are not happy with their lack of desire, she says, basically go and find a sexual stimulus and choose and decide to be receptive to it. That seems like pretty basic advice. Like, if you see something you like, go do it. But you think that it's, that is either oversimplifying it or she could be wrong.
Right. Well, she is an international expert in her area. However, there's other experts that have different ideas about what the female sexual response model is and how it works. And basically what I'm talking about here is a bit technical, but we used to believe from Master and Johnson that there's 4 stages of sexual excitement in human beings.
Look, who could not like the plateau stage, Bud?
Yeah, right.
And it's a great name for it, too.
Excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. But researchers realize our sexual function is a lot more complicated. Where does desire fit in the psychological and cultural aspects? So we've been trying to work that out in subsequent models. Besson believes that women don't experience spontaneous desire once they're in an established relationship. So that by and large, once you've settled down, women aren't going to be initiating sex.
Now, is this because of some serotonin-type chemical in the brain that gets burnt out after a period of time?
I don't think that's why she thinks that, but I definitely do think there's a strong biochemical aspect to all of this. But I think what she's arguing is that because women may not necessarily feel spontaneous desire for sex to start off, if they go into sex with their partner, desire very well may kick in that process. However, that's one kind of angle at looking at this. Many other researchers believe that that's not the case, and there was a study done to see which sex model suits women best, and about a third were in agreement with Rosemary Basson. A third of women fit the Masters and Johnson model, and a third fit another model. So there still isn't agreement about how female sexuality works in so many different ways. We can't agree on what female sexual dysfunction is. We can't agree on sexual function for women, nor if women have a definitive sexual peak. So there's a lot of actually mysterious areas.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed in women's magazines as I've got older is that they seeming to keep putting the women's sexual peak back. I remember when I was younger, they used to say it was 30s or something, and they've moved it into the 40s, and they seem to be putting it higher as the baby boomers get older. Is this to sell magazines, or is there any statistical evidence to prove that the women's sexual peak seems to be getting older?
Well, I just think this is so interesting. It really shows, the term, I didn't know this beforehand, but it's a cultural meme. So it's something that everybody believes.
Oh, a meme. I love that. It's a made-up word. M-E-M-E, meaning everyone thinking the same thing at the same time. Didn't mean as much before there was the internet, but with the internet, everybody can think this. Everyone knows the same thing because they're all reading the same thing. Everyone's watching the cat and that keyboard, and God, that's sexy.
So with that... There's this idea, yes, that women in their mid-30s have their sexual peak and men in their adolescent years. But do you know that this all comes down to one study by Alfred Kinsey, the sexologist? I believe it was in the 50s. And he found in his one study that women who were, 36, were masturbating and having the most orgasms.
And so that's what it was based on. And again, this is a difficult thing to do studies on in the first place. Is that part of the reason why there's a scarcity of information? Because is this the kind of thing that's difficult to get past an ethics committee?
It is, and you can't really, take a video camera and your notepad into people's bedrooms at night. So it is really complicated, and there's been a lot of stigma attached about studying sexuality. It's interesting, though. It's really since Viagra has hit the scene and become so financially successful that women's sexuality later in life and in general has become the area of scientific inquiry. Of course, money can be made from it, right?
Dr. Bella, this is definitely what I want to talk to you about, female sexual arousal disorder, or FSAD. Now, is this one of these made up or diseases that just weren't around? And if you could sell a female Viagra and tell people that they need it, man, you are printing money.
Yes. Well, it's very interesting. So in the 70s, this notion of female sexual dysfunction started popping up in the literature here and there, and that was involving issues associated with desire, arousal, orgasm, and sexual pain. And then, again, we hear about Viagra, and this becomes a widespread sort of idea that people are getting used to, that people are taking a drug to help males' sexual dysfunction.
Now, Dr. Bella Ellwood-Clayton, I've been with females that have taken Viagra a few times and have claimed that it's had a positive effect on them. And is that the case? Is there any study for this, or are they just experiencing the placebo effect?
Right. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Viagra has been given to women. its medical name being sildenafil, and other similar drugs as well. And they've largely proved to be rather disappointing. Although they produce women being wet or aroused, women's minds aren't. So it really goes to show that our mind is our true G-spot. When we are looking at sex drugs for women, there's been sort of three different areas. One's drugs that affect blood flow, which we were talking about, Viagra and such. Ones that affect the hormonal system, and others that affect the central nervous system.
And what do you think is the magic bullet for female sexuality drugs in the future? Or, like almost anything else in our pharmacy, there is no such thing as a magic bullet for everyone?
Well, there isn't yet, but I predict 15 years from now, within 15-year frame, there will be a sex drug for women to rival Viagra.
And, of course, there's me in leather pants, because that drives everyone crazy. It doesn't matter what sex they are.
Just getting back, though, to the idea of how female sexual dysfunction became so popular, it was found in a paper in 1999 in the Journal of American Medical Association that 43% of women had a sexual dysfunction. So, that sounds quite an obvious Mayday message to women, doesn't it? And it became a hot topic of conversation.
It certainly does. And the reading I've done prior to this interview, particularly from Bianca Lorino, I believe, she actually looked at one of the people that has looked at the methodology of this study, and I'm sure you're about to tell us where it perhaps may be flawed.
Yes, just amazing, isn't it? So women were classified with a dysfunction if they answered yes to just one of 7 questions, and these included whether they'd experienced lack of desire for sex, arousal difficulties,
whether they had felt anxious before sex, and look, that's me every time.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And also one which I find it could be a problem, but I wouldn't consider it always a problem, is that if the women came to climax too quickly.
Exactly.
Now that could be a problem, but it isn't always considered in the negative category.
So, we can see it's quite ludicrous to define someone as having a dysfunction if they sometimes don't desire sex or they climax too quickly. And the authors also didn't include the most important DSM criteria question, and this is, I'm referring to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health, which is like the Bible of mental health.
Hang on, is that the new one that's got things like orthorexia nervosa in it?
Well, there's one. The last one was done in 2000, and the newest one's coming out in 2013.
Oh, that's got orthorexia nervosa. I like mentioning that. That is the unhealthy obsession with eating healthy food.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, it's the people that take, I've got my carrot to eat today, and if they don't take their carrot, they don't eat anything till they get home and have their protein, and in the process cause more damage to themselves.
Yeah. My.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's why people get suspicious when you have FSAD come into that, because they go, hang on a minute, what about orthorexia nervosa? But please continue, Dr. Bella.
Sure. So in this study, they weren't asking women, are they distressed by their so-called low levels of desire or, climaxing too rapidly? And distress is an important element that is part of now the criteria to define female sexual dysfunction.
And so, obviously, if there's money why isn't there like a pharmaceutical company doing a very large, far-reaching study as we speak to either get this solved one way or the other so they can find out whether they can make money one way or the other?
Well, essentially, this is what I believe, is that for hospital ethic committees to approve a new drug trial, they must first have a disease for the product to treat. So inflated rates of female sexual dysfunction create a need for treatment. And we'll see that in the DSM, which we were talking about, the DSM-4, the Bible of Mental Health, the definitions of female sexual dysfunction that we are using came about from a number of conferences in which many of the researchers had links to drug companies. For instance, in one conference, 18 out of 19 participants were found to have a link to a total of 22 drug companies.
Now, hang on.
Yes.
Well, hang on. What's the phrase I'm thinking of? Hang on. Conflict of interest.
Oh, that's the one. And it is, it's a confusing area, and many of the top sex researchers from around the world, although they are being funded or have, act as advisory boards for big pharma, they say that their work isn't biased and that they're being transparent. But from afar, it certainly makes things, you want to put question to what's happening.
And of course, you have the problem, you have the same thing that people point out with vaccines, but the problem is if you want to talk to someone who's an expert on the flu, you probably have to get someone from the World Health Organization that knows all about it to help you. So these would be the people that you'd ask anyway, wouldn't they?
Yes, that's right. And so there has been numerous studies from around the world trying to figure out how many women are experiencing female sexual dysfunction, particularly in terms of low desire. The disorder in this DSM, Bible of Mental Health, that they've come up with is called HSDD, Hypoactive Sexual Desire Disorder. This means reoccurrent absence of sexual fantasies and desire for sex, which causes one marked distress and cannot be explained by another mental disorder, drug, or medical condition. I really believe, though, that this chronic low libido is the natural, normal state of affairs for many women, particularly in long-term relationships. I don't think it's necessarily a disorder.
But that's what I was going to ask you. How do we quantify the range of, as all scientists like to draw a nice bell curve, how do you figure out what is the correct so-called libido for anyone at any age in any culture?
Exactly. That is the question. You've exactly hit it. And the thing, too, is that culture, as you're pointing out, has a huge role in our sexuality. In the Victorian times, for instance, low female desire was considered a virtue. And now all of a sudden it's a disorder. And
they had all the really cool diseases too, like the vapors. That's a great... I've got the vapors. Get my steam-powered, vibrator, whatever they had then. And that's when they were first around, wasn't it? Because there was a whole sexual arousal problem that came in then.
Mm-hmm. So it really goes to show how the sexuality of women, what our sexuality should be like, is quite fashionable depending on where we live and what culture we're in. And to call it science and make it an absolute is quite dubious, I believe.
Look, and there's a phrase in your book, and excuse me if I misquote you there, but it's something like, females are about passion, they're just not always about sexual passion.
Yes.
And could you explain that? Because I think that sums things up beautifully.
Well, thank you. I really think as we look at our sex drive or our libido as our creative, sensual energy, our life force, which some of the original thinkers looking at libido did think of it this way. And then women's lives aren't devoid of passion. We may just be involved in passionate parenting or having passionate careers or presenting a home, an appearance that induces passion, or our home and dinner tables. I think there's a lot of passion and excitement and creativity in women's lives. And if couples decide they want more passion or sensuality in their partnerships, women may be able to rechannel some of this energy and redirect it towards their sensual partnerships.
And look, how much is it our fault? I mean, a lot of men did the early research. A lot of times here, men's sex drive is being compared to women's sex drive as if they should be similar powerful things at certain times. Where does that come into the whole thing? That, women should be more like men sexually sometimes and vice versa?
Very interesting point. I think that reflects what our current culture is sort of getting at. Sex is the new status symbol, and those that don't have it are not only inferior but potentially dysfunctional. It's really interesting. The definition of a sexless marriage in our time period is a relationship where couples are having sex 10 times a year or less. I think that's quite amazing that couples that have been together for a decade or have young, screaming toddlers or, enormous bills to pay, if they're having sex once a month or so, I think that's quite fantastic, and they're doing a great job at keeping their sensual bond alive. And yet here in our society, we're labeling that as a sexless relationship. It's quite intriguing.
If you could get a grant and you could get a study through an ethics committee, what kind of research would you like to do into sexuality in Australia in the 21st century that you think needs to be done to answer a few of these fundamental questions, Dr. Bella?
I think I'd like to explore with women how we can create more sensual lives, how we can work at sexual mindfulness, stilling our mind, removing ourselves from chores and that never-ending to-do list of all the things we have to get done, and work out together what ways we can come up with to have a more erotic life.
Do you think the role of pornography has damaged any of this? But I think you should assume that pornography is fantasy, not take it on as being reality. In the same way you could say, have Hollywood musicals damage the way people dance. So I'm just wondering how you feel about that.
Well, I think there's really two sides to pornography. I think it's certainly the exposure to young people's minds is very extensive and can set unrealistic expectations about the role of sex, how women look, how they act sexually, and that can be damaging.
Although traditionally, haven't young people always had put sex at an overly important part of their life?
They may have, but I think there's probably a difference between, looking at one centerfold, for instance, in a magazine, to being able to, at the touch of your screen, go to any country and see any sex act, no matter how, outrageous. That said, sex therapists often advise pornography for couples that are having low levels of desire in their relationship or to spice things up. So they see it as a sexual tool. So I think there are different elements to the argument.
Yes, and when you've been on panels debating this very topic, it is such an intricate topic. Have you ever found yourself getting caught up?
Well, certainly. It's very emotional for people, and it really hits buttons of, insecurity, worry about our future, what excites us is a personal issue. It really is a hotbed of inquiry.
And how would you answer the question when people say, everyone seems to be having more sex than me more often and it seems to be better? I mean, what's the best way to assure us that, things aren't that bad for us?
Well, I don't think everybody's having more sex than us, and I think if you talk to them 5 years into their relationship, it probably won't be the case.
One last question. Here's an interesting study, and I would like to know, because this is I think this is a good one. In 2007, from your book, Sex Drive, a 2007 American study found that when lap dancers were ovulating, they actually earned more tips than any other time during their cycle. Why is that? They're dancing better. People can somehow get something of the pheromones. Why do you think that is?
Well, it is quite mysterious, and I think there's still a lot to learn about our hormones and our sexuality, our ovulation, and women's sexuality generally across the lifespan.
Wow. Okay, look, thank you, Dr. Bella. And where do you suggest I should go for further reading? I mean, diving into Wikipedia can be a bit confusing, and I like to say Wikipedia is a little bit like a public toilet. It's only as good as the last person who was there. So, who knows what's been written there? Where's a website we could go to get more information about this?
Well, there's my website, which is www.drbella.com, DRBELLA.com. And then I suppose the book covers so many topics. So if you want to look, it depends where you're coming from. And I've really found that with the interviews I've been doing. For instance, if a mother is interviewing me, then the questions she has are often about parenting and sexuality, in which case you'd like to read. People could go and read more about that general area, or depression, or the future of sex drugs. So unfortunately, there isn't like a 1-2 place that I can direct people to, but if they had particular questions about different areas, I'd be happy to further pass on my reading material.
And just one last warning, there's a lot of woo in the world of sex. People want to sell you all sorts of things over the counter to help your sex drive. What is the one thing you should just try and avoid that definitely doesn't work, that a lot of people get sucked in by?
I think the thing that works the least is comparing our sexuality to the sexuality of others. Really just going to your home, figuring out with your partner what role sensuality wants to be in your life together, and being frank about that discussion, I think, is really the way to go, rather than seeking a product.
Now, I'm going to go out and do a bit more study on this lap dancing issue.
Okay, you do know. All right.
Hello, this is Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid Podcast. If you can be in New Hampshire this Monday night, drop by New England College in Henniker to hear my live show, Sounds from Beyond, for free at the Simon Center. Sounds from Beyond is a fun-filled hour featuring strange sounds that have either solved mysteries, created mysteries, or that help explain how and why our universe works the way it does. That's New England College, Monday, March 26, 2012, at 7 p.m. More information's at nec.edu, or come to Skeptoid.com to find out how to bring Sounds from Beyond to a venue near you. Hooroo!
here's Penny Chan with a penny for your thoughts.
Welcome to another episode of Penny for Your Thoughts. Right now, I'm at John Rail's apartment.
You're welcome.
I'm here with John Rail and
Lauren Donahue
and
Jarrett Kaufman.
Jarrett Kaufman. And today I'm going to be talking to Jarrett Kaufman about IIG. So, have you been on the Skeptic Zone before?
I have not. This is my first time on the podcast. So
okay.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, first explain what the IIG is, for those who don't.
The IIG is the Independent Investigations Group. We're based out of Hollywood, California, or Los Angeles. And so we are a paranormal and pseudoscience investigations group made up of volunteer members. It's a dues-paying organization. That's what gives us the funds we need to actually carry out various tasks, go to events, and pay for the costs of these things. But we as opposed to being like a meetup group that just hangs out and talks about skepticism, we're the ones who are actually actively participating. So whether we're going out and finding something to investigate or whether people are coming to us, we're always actively working. One of the things we're known for is we do have a $50,000 paranormal challenge. And so people will come to us, usually online. They'll email us and fill out an application and tell us, I have this amazing paranormal ability of some sort, whether it's psychic abilities or psychic projection, or in our most recent case, dowsing, or a variety of other things. People will say to us, this is some special ability I've got, and I can prove it. And then we say, great, if you can prove it under reasonable scientific conditions, which includes a protocol that they agree upon with us. So it's not just us setting all the rules. They have to say to us, this is what I can do, and we work with them to finalize something that they say, yes, that's definitely within the range of something I can do, and those conditions are reasonable. And then we carry that out, and assuming they can pull it off in a preliminary demonstration, we move on to a much more rigorous final test, and that's when they would get $50,000. We also have a $5,000 finder's fee to anyone who brings someone to us who then wins the $50,000. So that's our little, it's our little extra carrot, because we'll always have people say to us, oh, well, my sister-in-law has this amazing ability, but she doesn't want to get tested. She doesn't think it's worth it. But when we say to them, well, you can also get $5,000 for bringing that person to us, and if they succeed, then suddenly they're starting to push that person. So that helps. And our most recent was we just tested a dowser, actually, a man from Phoenix, Arizona, in his 70s, who really genuinely believes he has dowsing abilities. He uses this. Dowsing is typically using a tool of some sort. The most common is two metal rods, L-shaped rods that you hold one in each hand, the short end in each hand, and you just basically walk around typically a field. The most common thing people douse for, I believe, is water. Oil is a common thing as well, and probably other things.
I thought it was any lost thing.
Well, certainly, that's something I've known people to douse for as lost things. But I think as far as financial gain goes, water is a very common one. They'll douse for the right spot to dig a well. So anyway, this person's variation is he uses just one rod and can walk around and find. He claimed a lot of things. He claimed disturbed earth and other factors. But the test we settled on was he could definitely find water in a jug that we hid under a filing box, a box meant to carry papers. So we basically set up a condition with 15 boxes, and he.
And when was this?
This was actually just yesterday, so the 17th of March. For St. Patrick's Day. So we did...
Finding gold!
Yes. So we set this up in our offices at the Center for Inquiry in Los Angeles, and he came, he pre-dowsed the area, and he found a few areas that he said he was getting readings from, that he was picking up something. Maybe there was a pipe there. He does it with just one rod. Typically, it's two where they cross in the middle, and that's when they've got a signal. But in his case, it'll just dip off center, and especially if it's really strong, it'll just fall right out of his hand. I forget what material he said it was. It just looked like I think it was not aluminum. I'm not sure what it was, but he said he's used other wiring as well, like copper wiring, and that worked for him. He claimed. So anyway, in this case. He tested the area, found a couple spots that made him uncomfortable, so we moved boxes around until he was comfortable that none of the boxes was in an area that was giving him any readings of water. And so then we did on three phases, which gave us odds of, I think it was 3,375 to 1 if he would get all three in a row. I'm not fast on the maths, but that was roughly the figure. And so he would have to get the hidden bottle in all three tests to succeed. And so we double-blinded this, where we picked 2 people to be Team 1. Everybody left the room, including the claimant, everyone else. The cameras were shut off, except for cameras used to record it for our proof later on that everything was carried out properly. And 2 people would draw a number from a basket, 1 out of 15, and then go around moving each box, rotating each box so that they all were disturbed, and placing the bottle under the one that was chosen from the number. Then leave, go into a room where they had no access to anyone else, and call out to let everyone know that they were clear and go back in. That way there wasn't contamination with anyone as they left the room. And then everybody returned. The dowser did his work, walked around, got a reading, and said, yep, that's the box. That definitely the water bottle's under that one. And they lifted that box, and no water bottle. And then the other team would come back in and reveal which box it was actually under, and then they check all the other boxes just to prove that there weren't any false readings. And so this was carried out 3 times, and unfortunately for the dowser, who was very confident that he could definitely do what he claimed he could do, he did not succeed on any of the 3 tests.
He got 0 out of 3?
Got 0 out of 3. And you could see the poor guy was getting more dejected as he went along.
Really thought he
you can never tell what's in the heart and mind of someone, but at least my personal opinion was he was genuine in his belief that he had this ability. And to give him credit, he seemed also very genuine in desiring that we handle the test honestly, not just to be fair to him, but he was asking us questions about how we were blinding it to really ensure we were blinding it. So he seemed to genuinely want to prove that this was real as well, and unfortunately he didn't. I'd say he definitely still seemed relatively convinced there was something to his abilities. I mean, he still said that when he went home, he was still going to be continuing to practice it, and because he says he knows it works when he's home. So that's a common thing we deal with these people, is they usually aren't convinced they don't have the ability. They're just convinced there's a reason it didn't work here. But he was clearly shaken and disappointed, and we see that, and we always feel bad for these people. I mean, a lot of us are rooting for them. Even if we don't necessarily believe going in it's going to work, when we see it, we sure want to see something work.
I can't believe it would get that far. I mean, ask a friend. Be like, hey, babe, can you set up these jugs? I'm going to step outside and I'll be back in. But don't tell me which one. Just a simple, generic, single blind study.
Well, the thing is, I think a lot of people don't know what it means to blind study something. Lay people.
Even little kids, it's like, okay, don't tell me if you're looking at me, but I'm going to try and guess, and then you tell me if I got it right or not.
Well, and this gentleman, Lewis, did claim that he has done blinded testing with friends. Now, it's single-blinded, and that was a thing that he wasn't familiar with of why double-blinding was important, and we had to explain that to him after the fact. But he has single-blinded. He has friends, never to this degree. He said he's really only done it under 4 hidden objects before, but he'll have his friends hide it under one of the objects, and then he goes and douses. So we had to explain to him that the subtle clues that an observer can give that are subconscious. And, of course, we did have to teach him about the idiomotor effect, which is really what was being employed during the test, or at least as far as we're concerned. And he kept making claims about, see, my hands aren't moving, and yet the rod's going off perspective. And so we really had to explain to him the concept, which he hadn't realized was as subtle as it actually is. He was really expecting, he was asking questions. Well, yeah, but if I don't know it's there, then why would I be reacting to it? And one person pointed out, well, if you went by the first time and you got a slight feel about it, now you've convinced yourself that box is the one. So each time you go back, you'll have that effect. So we were explaining the elements of it, but that's an example of one of the many types of tests we go through, and it was certainly one of the more interesting ones.
So you said he went from Arizona?
Yeah, he drove out here himself, all the way from Phoenix.
And he contacted you from all the way?
Yes.
Are there any groups there? That sort of thing. I guess not.
Not that I'm aware of. The IIG is branching out. We have affiliates now, not only all over the United States. We've got, I think, at least one in Canada, and we have interest from other continents. We've gotten people who are really hoping to possibly set up IIG affiliates in completely different places, and some real surprises. We've gotten some contact from Africa. We've gotten some contact from Poland. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but it's places where you'd be surprised, although happily surprised to find out that there are skeptics everywhere, and there's some places that sure as heck need them. I mean, it's bad enough here, obviously, in the U.S. We here in the U.S. we hear about all the ass kicking that Australia's doing, but realistically, there's some countries that really need some help, and it's nice to know that there are people there who are trying.
So, also, tell me about The Odds Must Be Crazy?
Yes.
How long has that been going on?
Well, The Odds Must Be Crazy is a project that's been in the works for a couple of years now. The basis of this one, and I definitely want to make sure this credit's given out because it's really deserved. A member of our group, Wendy Hughes, who's been part of the IIG for, if not as long as it's been around, then nearly as long as we've been in business, so to speak. She got the idea to start tracking stories about coincidences. Basically just those too good to be true or too crazy to be true kind of stories that everybody experiences. And she wanted to see, start collecting them and see is there something here that maybe we're missing, or what can we learn from these? And so it was a group project to just try to collect these stories. My involvement was I got the idea to actually convert it into a public website instead of a private project, and actually start collecting these stories from more than just our group, but from anyone reading the site. So the basic principle to explain it is we collect exactly the sort of stories I was talking about. Everybody experiences things like whether it's dreaming about a celebrity and then the next day you find out they passed away, or thinking about someone and the phone rings and you answer it and they're the ones calling, or running into a college buddy in a completely different part of the world and being surprised by it, or some even much cooler stories that we've started to pick up on that have surprised us. But the idea is to show these stories, share them, celebrate them. We're not trying to put them down and say, oh, this isn't that interesting a story. It could happen to anyone. No, it's very cool. These stories amaze all of us no matter what we know about them already, but it's to share them. So Wendy and I worked really hard on this project, developing a plan for the website, developing our business model, so to speak, even though there's no money in this whatsoever, and that's not the goal. It's just for fun, and it's an opportunity.
It can be informative too.
Well, yes.
Lesson in probabilities.
Well, and that's the idea, is we wanted the site to appeal to everyone. This is not an overtly skeptical site, or at least that was the plan. It's a site to share fun stories. And then occasionally we're going to inject editorials that will teach people as well about what's going on beyond it. So whether it's an editorial comment under the story that mentions some of the aspects of it that would explain it, we're going to try to start injecting some statistics into the stories and just expanding out so that people will hopefully learn. But at the very least, if they don't learn, they're just going to be entertained. And we make it easy to share the stories on various social websites, so you can easily click a button to instantly tweet it or like it on Facebook or +1 it on Google or things like that. I think it's really valuable these days because people live on social networks. Mm-hmm. And so it's and honestly, a large percentage of our hits so far come from social networks. So people are clearly sharing stories on there. And we've got, assuming people check the box that says they allow it, we've got people's actual names on the story so they can feel a personal connection to the story. So that's important. And we're expanding out. I mean, we've been getting stories from people in the skeptical community. George Hrobb mentioned us recently on the podcast because someone had actually mentioned him in a story. And he got a kick out of that. And I loved it because he really spent some time on his podcast talking specifically about exactly what we're about from his own perspective. He told a story of something that happened to him that I loved. And it was a great example of something that was a really eerie, freaky coincidence. And more importantly, as he pointed out, it had no meaning. It didn't lead to anything. It didn't cause anything. There wasn't anything about his story that he could learn from. But if something that freakish can happen that has no meaning, then odds are occasionally someone's going to have something that freakish that to them does have a meaning, and they'll apply that to their lives and really think it's a sign from something, or fate, or whatever you'll call it. So it's easy to understand why people put so much power behind these things. So I really liked what he wrote, and I got his permission, and it's been transcribed and put up on our website as an editorial.
Cool. So aside from him, we've had some interesting guest writers.
Yes. We just put up a story from Barry Carr. Barbara Drescher is involved in the site. She's written at least one editorial now. She's got more she's going to be working on, and she's going to be doing some statistics work for us. Who else has we've got a few on the back burner from a few names in the community. So I'll debut as those debut. We'll
Don't
see.
Give
Absolutely
away.
Right. And we've got exciting news coming up that I will not give up. I will not give out yet. We will be making a different kind of premiere for The Odds Must Be Crazy soon. That will hopefully put us on the radar for a lot more people.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's a good project. Yeah, Wendy and I work very hard on it. She is constantly working in the background, communicating with people, getting stories uploaded. She's doing all of the, I guess you could call it the administrative work or the personal work, really communicating with people and making sure that personal touch is there. And then, as the geek I am, I'm doing the technical stuff. And we've got a few other people within the IIG helping us out. We've got Susan Gerbic, who is really great with her guerrilla skepticism on Wikipedia concept. That's huge for the IIG and skepticism in general. And she's been a great cheerleader for us, constantly tweeting and Facebooking our stuff and contacting people about it. And just in general, we've got several team members who write a lot of stories. Brian Hart from the IIG is probably the single largest submitter to our site.
I know, Mark Edward.
Mark Edward has written a couple editorials for us now, absolutely, and he talked about us on his blog, on Skeptic's blog. And another member of our team of the steering committee, Spencer Marks, has written some of the most entertaining stories we've got up there. So we've got our own team is really regularly contributing, but we have broken out well past, not past our own community, even past the skeptical community. We are getting submissions from people.
It would be great to have people outside, because you don't want to make it look like...
No, this is not a preaching to the choir site.
Like a psychological inbreeding
Correct. This is not preaching to the choir. This is meant to reach out well past our community. And we are getting regular hits from people who clearly are finding... We're finding our links to our site on sites that have nothing to do with skepticism now. We're finding stories submitted to us from people who clearly are not connected, comments from people who found us through crazy search terms. I mean, we're getting hits on various things that are not related at all. And that's the point, is we wanted to reach out to people who would otherwise not purposefully put themselves in our community.
That is so important, because you could really help some people who are like, this crazy coincidence happened and I don't know what to make of it.
Right. And
is there a site of things that like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's entertaining, and we're finding patterns in them now that we're gonna start building off of the patterns and seeing what we can learn from them. But we're finding a lot of stories of very similar types of events, and that's kind of interesting. But absolutely, we don't want to ruin the fun for people. We're not here to set out and say your story isn't interesting. It is very interesting, regardless of whether it means something more. It can be fun just on its own.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you for telling me all about that.
I'm Eugenie Scott, Executive Director of the National Center for Science Education in Oakland, California. We defend and support the teaching of evolution and climate change when it comes under attack for religious and political reasons. We help teachers, parents, school boards, and other citizens defend good science in the schools. Come visit us at ncsc.com and on YouTube and Facebook, and let us know if science comes under attack in your community. We're here to help.
Well, it's hard to believe, it really is, that QED has just ended. The last session with Joe Nickel, followed by lots of warm speeches by the organisers. But how lucky am I, listeners, and I finally get to meet Kristin Carlsson from the Norwegian Skeptics. Hi.
Hey, you are lucky, aren't you? Yeah.
I like her sense of humour, folks. I am very lucky, of course, to meet you, because we've been corresponding for a long time.
We have.
Well,
yeah, it's really
it
nice.
seems like a long time.
Well, yeah. I mean, when was that interview I had with you? Was it...
when did you do the 1023?
I did it in February of Yeah, February of last year, 2011. I think it was. And
No, really?
Yeah.
Only that recently?
Because that was the last QED.
Okay.
That was the
It
last
seems
QED.
like a long time. But yes, I saw you on a video. They were in Oslo, overdosing on homeopathic medicine. And I thought, she's someone I want to interview. Look at her. She's fronting the camera. She's getting out there, and she's leading the people in this overdose. And I contacted you. I can't remember how. I wrote something or other, and we got in touch, and then I interviewed you. That's right.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you could see the panic in my face during that video, because I knew that they would be put up on YouTube and stuff like that. And but yeah, that was a lot of fun. I said that last time as well.
Yeah, you're looking different now, because on that video you're dressed up for the cold.
Dressed up for the cold. It was February. Bit milder here in Manchester. Very nice, really nice. It's just been a great weekend.
Hasn't it?
It has. It's been a while since I was at my my usually needed nerd conference. So that was a relief to finally go. Yeah.
You class yourself as a nerd, huh?
Well, I have to. I mean, I'm cheering for the nerds in any case. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, I like the science, and I like the skeptics, and I like all the themes they discuss. I can't really choose a favourite subject either. So.
Well, that's one of the things I love about conferences like this one, which I'm so impressed by this conference. It's been really, really, really good. And TAM, of course, and things like that is the variety.
Yes.
There's all sorts of topics and issues being covered.
Yeah, I mean, I was just finished, yesterday there was a couple of really interesting panels on, activism, outreach, and also a panel on cryptozoology, and I've seen a talk about UFOs today. I've never seen a talk about UFOs today before, so that was really good. And then suddenly the fantastic Mariam Namazi comes up and talks about, secularism to fight organised religion, and it was just so moving. I couldn't believe some of the things I heard. And
well, I was. You were up in the privileged area, the VIP area.
Yeah, I got an invitation from a mysterious figure in the hallway there.
And when that wonderful talk about UFOs was on, and I still find that really interesting, all that UFO stuff, and it was such a good talk.
I remember only, slightly when I was a bit from late childhood to early teenagers, I was completely fascinated by the UFO stuff, because I've always been interested in space and astronomy. Mm-hmm. That's why I studied astronomy, but I was a really big UFO fan as well. I can really think critically about it back then, and I remember just taping all the UFO documentaries.
Yes.
Listening to all the testimonies of people who worked at Area 51, and it's like, I just thought, I was a naive kid, and I thought, I mean, these are grown-up people on television. They can't lie about what they say, but after a while I learned that they actually can. Well, at least be delusional about it.
Yes, that's probably the best way to put it. Be delusional, make mistakes.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to sort of slowly learn about that process.
Is that what sparked your interest generally in skepticism, do you think? Something like that?
Yeah, it has to be. I think the fact that I've always been interested in astronomy is what made me be more rational, because that led me on to the university, where I took some, you have some preparing studies where you learn philosophy and all that, and suddenly I learned about the difference between science and pseudoscience. No one has told me that before. Wow. So that was I kind of blame myself a bit because I was a bit lazy when I was younger, but I've caught up.
Now, how did you meet with Marit? Because you two seem to be the face of Norwegian skepticism almost.
Yeah,
the combined face.
Marit, cool. Yes, we didn't meet until a while after the other conference, which was held in London, the TAM London, in 2009.
Oh, so wow. So you haven't known each other that long?
Yeah, no. She was studying biology at the same university as me, and we were both at that conference. But I never got the chance to talk to her then. So I remember seeing her and all the Norwegians at that conference. But It was just after that conference where we were discussing on the Skeptics Forum, discussion forum in Norway, where she and a couple of other people really wanted to start a conference like that in Norway, and particularly in Oslo. And I was just so incredibly motivated after Tam London 2009. So I just put my hand up in the air frantically and said, I have no idea what I can do, but I will join you guys. I will join you guys. So after that, I just got to know them better and got to a couple of Skeptics in the Pub meetings, and yeah.
And
rest is history.
It would be really nice to see you at TAM in Las Vegas at some stage.
Yeah, at some stage I will get to TAM in Vegas. Of course, this last year I was... Where was I last year? I wasn't at many conferences, but I couldn't make it to Vegas then. And unfortunately, I won't be able to get there this year either, because I am going to a place you might know, Australia.
So I've heard, yeah.
In just a week and a half from now, actually.
Yeah.
This is probably all I think about nowadays. It's going to be fantastic. So yeah, I'm basically using up all my money and vacation time on that trip.
Well, if you had to go somewhere other than the amazing meeting in Las Vegas, I guess Australia is a good alternative.
I am actually... I did notice that the last weekend that I'm in Australia, in Melbourne actually, there's an atheist conference.
Yeah, so I understand.
Yeah. And so I'm going to that as well. So looking forward to that. It should be really exciting. The Four Horsemen was supposed to be there. Of course, Hitchens can't be there, but the rest will obviously attend, and lots of other interesting people.
Now, can you envisage at some stage in the future, and the answer has to be yes, that there's going to be a big skeptical convention in Norway with speakers from all around the world? Because you've already had James Randi there, and that was a big success.
Yeah, that was the Norwegian Humanist Association's great campaign on critical thinking. Started in beginning of 2011 as well, which I cheered along massively. And that was just a huge success, because he had like a small tour of of Norway, and he just filled up.
I've seen the video. Yeah. It's available. If it's YouTube or another service, but it's not hard to find. Yeah, it's a great video.
You can just Google it and it will come up. And we did get him to come to the Skeptics in the Pub in Oslo, and we just took over the entire cafe where we were. And got to interview him for my podcast as well. So that was fantastic, and I love that initiative by the humanists. That campaign on critical thinking it's been quite controversial actually. It's got a lot of flack from the alternative movement, because the Humanist Association is quite big, and Norway well vocal, and people know about them. So that means those people will also know about them, and they've gotten lots of sort of counter campaigns, and a little bit of they accuse everyone of bullying and stuff like that. So it's very interesting to follow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now here's some advice for listeners around the world. Run to your DVD library, your DVD rental library, and look for a movie called Troll Hunter. It's such fun.
I heard you liked it.
I loved it.
I love that movie. Yeah. It's a great popcorn film, I think. Yeah. It's a kind of a mockumentary, I guess you would call it.
It's like one of those found footage documentaries where this film was discovered, and we can't, all the people are probably dead by now or something like that.
Yeah. So Say No More. It's about trolls. And
it's about trolls and about hunting, sort of. Troll Hunter.
Yeah,
that's
Norwegian film, of course, obviously. That's why Richard mentions it.
I did, and I don't think I've seen many Norwegian films.
No, it's quite.
In fact, that one is in Norwegian too.
Yes,
there
it is.
Go. It's the subtitles were fine. I guess, but you do miss some jokes, I guess, which are for Norwegians.
There are some specific in-jokes and things pertaining to the folklore, I guess, around trolls. But, a couple of points are pretty over-explained in the film. I think so.
No, it's all good fun.
It should be all good, yeah.
Well, I've come a long way to Manchester, but you know what? It's not that much further to Oslo. Maybe I can put my mind to getting over there.
That is a very good point.
At some stage.
I think you should think about it really well.
I will definitely.
You are very welcome over to Oslo. We would love to have you.
One day.
Yeah.
Yes, let's do it. Next year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, get on with it. Right. Sure.
Kristin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Jeg er Marit. Og jeg er Kristin. Og vi vil tipse deg som norsk lytter av Skeptic Zone om skeptikermiljøet i Norge. Det finnes norske blogger og pubtreff og podcast, og foreningen Skepsis driver med slikt som disse du hører på nå. Sentralt er skepsis.no, og her publiseres det dyptgående artikler, en kalender over aktiviteter og lenker til nyttige ressurser. Skepsisbloggen oppdateres jevnlig, og det diskuteres heftig på forumet, så stikk innom og delta du også. Skepsis.no.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 179. Good heavens, nearly 180. And a bit later down the year, it'll be episode 200. Wow. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Coming up soon, I'm going to be offering some more Maynard merchandise for bid on eBay. And another, let me just roll it out here, another one of these fantastic posters from the Centre for Inquiry, signed by all sorts of people, including Brian Dunning, Phil Plait, Maynard himself, Joe Nichol, Rebecca Watson, Steve Novella, and many more. Could be yours. Coming up in a few weeks, I think. Plus some Maynard books and CDs. All of that, of course, is to help pay for Maynard's plane ticket to TAM in Las Vegas, and I'm delighted to see and very flattered that I'll be a speaker at TAM, along with Dr. Deity, in fact. Fantastic stuff. Anyway, that's all a bit down the track. I think I better practice some more magic. I've got a magic cat next to me. Really? You want to do some magic? All right. Me and the cat are off to do some magic. And until next week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. What do you want?
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.